Hello again, baseball fans, and welcome back to another episode of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. I am your host, Kris Dunn, joined as always by our MLB Draft expert over at Prospects Live, Joe Doyle out on the West Coast. What's going on, Joe?
I'm good, man. How are you? How was your weekend?
It was good. It was good. Got a little weekend getaway. Came back a little refreshed and ready to go. It's nice to be back to our routine of
It is.
seeing each other at least once a week. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Let's rock and roll, baby.
Let's do it. So we've got the mock draft 2.0 that launched last week. We teased it quite a bit last week on the show, but for those of you that have no idea what we're talking about, we apologize for you on your behalf. Please now go to prospectslive.com and pull up that mock draft 2.0, and you can get a look at where we think some of these top prospects will land based on the draft order. So what we're going to do for this show here is really talk quite a bit about that mock draft and also some of the teams that are picking, what the thought process is a little bit with some of the teams and why these guys might be a fit. What you are not going to see on this show is the number one prospect on our top 400 list go 1-1. Number 2 go 2. Number 3 go 3. Number 4 go 4. That is not in any way, shape, or form what this is about. It's very conceivable that the guys that are listed 1 through 10 go nowhere near 1 through 10 in that order. So this is supposed to emulate what the actual draft might look like based on really the teams, not just where we have them ranked as prospects overall. So without any further ado, the Baltimore Orioles are on the clock with the first overall pick. And Joe, we have him listed as our number one prospect. And we also have the Baltimore Orioles taking him here at 1-1, even though I don't agree. But let's give it to the listeners. Let's give it to the viewers out there. Drew Jones going to the Baltimore Orioles at 1-1. What do you got?
Yeah, so I honestly think at this stage, I mean, we're still 3 months out, a little less than 3 months out. There is no consensus for where Baltimore is going to go. They have been at almost every Drew Jones game. They've been at a handful of Elijah Green games. They've been at a handful of Jackson Holiday games. They're doing their due diligence on Brooks Lee and Termar Johnson. I mean, they're kind of all over the map right now. But what we are seeing and what we are hearing is they're not skipping any of these premier talents games. They really want to get a feel for who these guys are at the top. And this by no means suggests that Drew Jones is the favorite or anything to go 1-1. It's just kind of where we think they're going to end up going. And Drew Jones fits a number of needs for Baltimore. They don't have in my opinion, a center fielder of the future, at least not an elite center fielder of the future. And I think Drew Jones is that anchor that can play in Baltimore for 15 years and try and repeat some of the successes that his dad did.
What do you say about the people that think that Baltimore should go with a college prospect here, with the thought process being that we're looking at Baltimore having a very good farm system and a lot of prospects that are right there, right? You talk about Adley Rutschman, you talk about Grayson Rodriguez, you talk about DL Hall, right? Like we're talking about 3 or 4 big time prospects within the Baltimore organization that are right there. And if they don't make their major league if they don't lose all eligibility at the end of the 2022 season, they're probably certainly going to make their big league debut at some point in the 2022 season. So, there might be some people out there that think maybe they should go the college route to get a guy that might quicker join this core group, right? Because that is kind of the core group there when you talk about a Mountcastle and a Grayson Rodriguez and a DL Hall on the pitching staff. Any thoughts on that? And if they did go the college route?
I mean, my take on it, I've seen that argument quite a bit, and I think Brooks Lee does make a ton of sense for Baltimore. I think the underslot ability of Brooks Lee is a little overstated right now. Brooks Lee is one of the best prospects in this class, and I don't think you're going to get a huge haircut by taking him first overall. I think he's deserving of $7 or $8 million that might come his way in that case. But here's what I would ask: is Brooks Lee as good? Does he have the ceiling that a Drew Jones or an Elijah Green or a Termarr Johnson have, especially the first two? Do you take Brooks Lee because he's going to move quick, or do you take him because he's the best player available? And in my eyes, this is just my personal opinion. I think the upside of Drew Jones and Elijah Green, specifically those two, is, and even Jackson Holiday to a degree. I think the upside of those two or three players is so high that taking Brooks Lee, who might not have carrying power, he might have to shift over to third base. He's not a dynamic runner. Brooks Lee is an exceptionally superior hitter, but I just don't know if he has superstar potential. And I think this is a great draft to potentially land a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hinted around it, but I just look at it in terms of what if Drew Jones went to college and had the experience of 3 more years of development in college? Do you think that Drew Jones in 3 years of college would be better than Brooks Lee is right now?
Well,
And I
that's the $8 million question.
right. But I think the answer is yes, right? I mean, we think he's better than Brooks Lee right now, so why don't we think he would be better than him in 3 years?
Well, listen, Drew Jones is going to put on 15 or 20 pounds of muscle, and he's going to look like a totally different animal in 3 years. And I'm excited to see, where that is. You look at Brooks Lee right now, and he's playing at Cal Poly. He's playing in college ball, and he's going to get drafted as a 21-year-old. Drew Jones might be in AAA at that point, and he's an elite runner. He's got at least plus bat speed. He's going to steal you bases. He's going to play a premier center field. As long as you're convinced that either Drew Jones or Elijah Green is going to be able to hit pro pitching, the upside is just enormous. And so I think walking away from that, especially at the idea of just saving a little bit of money, I personally wouldn't go that route. I do understand the people that think saving money and getting another premier talent, in the second or third round, quantity over quality type, is an approach that does make some sense. But if there was ever a high school class to take at the top, it's kind of hard to envision a better high school crop than what you've got at the top this season.
Right. We saw the Orioles do it recently with Heston Kjerstad, right? No one saw that coming, and so they did go that route. But the second pick in the draft belongs to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and we've got them in our mock 2.0 selecting Termarr Johnson, the infield second baseman from Mays High School. What are your thoughts on him here?
Again, I think so much of this is still up in the air. None of this is by any means predictive, but it is a gut feel for where we think they're going to go. Arizona has stayed up the middle of the field, every draft for the last 3 years. Termarr Johnson fits that mold. I think the idea of a Corbin Carroll, Jordan Lawler, Termarr Johnson up the middle of the field with the pitching prospects that they have coming, I think that's really exciting. Again, here, I think Jackson Holiday makes a ton of sense. I don't think you ever skip out on a premier shortstop prospect just because you already have one. So I think Jackson Holiday makes a ton of sense. I think Elijah Green makes a lot of sense. He's going to be able to shift over to right field if Corbin Carroll stays in center field, and even if Corbin Carroll gets hurt again, we've seen his durability challenged. Elijah Green can play center field with the best of them. So again, I think with Arizona, they have such a track record of going prep that I would be shocked in this class if they didn't take one of Jones, Johnson, or Green. Or Holiday. I'll put Holiday in that bunch as well.
See, and you bring up Holiday, which I think might be the better play here. I just have a hard time. I look at the position, right? And I think by and large, everyone's looking at Termarr Johnson as a second baseman at the big league level. And for me, I just have a hard time taking a guy who is really only going to be playing one position, and that position being second base. Like, second base is not that position. Look, usually the second baseman is playing second base because he's not as good as the starting shortstop, right? Like, that's well known. And so I think that there's other guys, whether it's an outfielder, whether it's an arm, or it's someone on the left side of the infield, like the shortstop, like you mentioned, Jackson Holiday, that just might be a better fit. I think this is, without question, absolute peak here for Termarr Johnson. I don't envision a scenario where he goes 1, and I'm actually a little bit shocked to see Arizona take him here at number 2, but obviously the talent is there. It's a name that we've been talking about for a long time now, so I guess it wouldn't be too much of a shock to see the Diamondbacks go that route. And then the third pick in the draft belongs to the Texas Rangers. And this is where the Texas Rangers are going to go, where I think the Arizona Diamondbacks could have gone at number 2, and they might go at number 2. But we've got the Rangers here taking shortstop out of Stillwater High School, son of former big leaguer Matt Holliday, Jackson Holliday, here to the Rangers. What do you got?
Again, I mean, it's just a crapshoot at the top. I'm not going to go out and say that we know anything that anybody else knows, not this early at least.
Right.
I think Holiday makes a ton of sense if he's on the board. I think Elijah Green makes a ton of sense if he's on the board. All of them do. Termar Johnson. The Rangers like Termar Johnson. Elijah Green makes sense. I do think I will say regarding the Rangers, if you're looking at a team that wants to win fast, they want to win quickly, I would actually put the Texas Rangers in a entirely different bucket than Baltimore because, listen, you just spent $500 million on Marcus Semien and Corey Seager, and they're not getting any younger. So I do think the idea of getting a talented college bat here and getting that player to the big leagues in 2024 to supplement a couple of guys that are already 30-ish, 32 years old, I think that makes a lot of sense here too. So wouldn't be surprised if Brooks Lee is the pick here, but also, I also think Gavin Cross is a sleeper here. So watch out for Gavin Cross, watch out for Brooks Lee, but I still think at this number 3 pick, the class is so incredibly talented and top heavy with preps here in the top 5. I think it's too good for them to walk away from.
So Jackson Holliday going to the Rangers at number 3. And then the 4th pick belongs to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They are no stranger to drafting in the top 5. We've got them mocked with Kevin Parada here. Now, interesting.
This was an interesting one because
right.
I got a lot of flack for this one, and I have my reasons. Listen, Henry Davis is an exquisite talent. He was my favorite prospect in the 2021 class, and he got his way up to the number 1 pick. Pittsburgh was not afraid to take the best college bat on the board. And I just think Kevin Parada is so far and away the best bat on the board in the college ranks here that I think you just have to go with it. Kevin Parada for me is in that same vein as Andrew Vaughn was, as maybe not quite what Spencer Torkelson was, but he's not far off. Right. I mean, this kid can really, really, really hit. And I think he's as close to a sure thing in terms of a college bat as you're going to find. At some point, I think Pittsburgh needs to, I don't want to say walk away from, the prep demographic that they've gone after so heavy. And I think they need to start going and grabbing some, we'll call it sure things, closer to the major prospects. And I think Kevin Parada could be hitting for Pittsburgh by September of 2023.
Right. And, one thing that people will forget, they just draw to the position, right? People look at the position, they're like, you make no sense. That's stupid. Why would they take a catcher? They just took a catcher 1st overall last year. They have no business taking a catcher 4th overall this year. You have no idea what you're talking about. That doesn't make any sense. You brought up the great point, Joe, is you want guys that can hit. And I talked about it a little bit earlier. The Pirates are another team that have a couple big name prospects that are right there, that are going to be joining the club this year, and they're going to be there for the foreseeable future. And so why not go after another college bat? Who cares if on paper, as of right now, they are both catchers? Guess what? Maybe one of them can develop into a first baseman.
Well, here's the thing.
I mean, DH.
You look at it, and you look at Detroit right now. Eric Haas is playing the outfield because the bat is so good. They're just making it work.
Right.
There's a DH in the NL. There's a first base position in the NL. And Kevin Parada is not a bad athlete. The guy moves really well. Hell, when he came out of California as a high schooler, there was talks about, oh, maybe this guy could play third base. Maybe Georgia Tech gives him a little bit of run at third base just to see what it's like. He's a good athlete. there's enough ways to get both Henry Davis and Kevin Parada in the lineup in a night in and night out basis to make it work. And I'll throw one more example your way. The Giants took Joey Bart in 2018, I believe it was. Actually 2019, I think, out of Georgia Tech. They took Patrick Bailey the next year because it turns out Joey Bart isn't a slam dunk defensive catcher, and he's not going to be a guy that can stay back there 130 games out of the season. You need two catchers. You know, if you can catch Kevin Parada 50 times a season and you can catch Henry Davis 110 times a season and you can save their knees and get them both in the lineup, that's a hell of an offensive duo. You couple that with some of the younger prospects that they've got coming up that they've invested in over the last few years. I just don't know if there's a way for you to draft Kevin Parada and regret it down the road.
Right. And I don't know where. I think that, I think there would be a greater likelihood that the Pirates selected someone with that pick if it wasn't Kevin Parada. And then in hindsight, would look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't take Kevin Parada.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. They're in a draft position where one of Tamar Johnson, Drew Jones, Elijah Green, and Jackson Holiday, one of them is going to be on the board.
Right.
No matter what. That doesn't mean that you should automatically take them. I think, the Pirates might not fall in love with all four of those players. And if the last one that is remaining, you're not in love with, but Kevin Parada is going to be a guy that hits 290 with 30 homers at the big league level, take the surefire bet. Do you see the Tigers, struggling to rationalize why they took Torkelson 1-1, or the White Sox struggling to rationalize why they took Andrew Vaughn 1-1? No, those guys are figuring it out at the big league level right now. They're big league hitters, and that is ultimately what you need to compete at the big league level. You need hitters. You need big league hitters. Yeah. And I don't see a lot of that in Pittsburgh's. I mean, they've got a lot of good prospects. Don't get me wrong. They don't have a lot of sluggers. They need guys that can slug the ball. And I think Kevin Parada is a great option.
So the Washington Nationals are on the clock with the 5th pick. And we've talked about the name here quite a bit. And so let's just get right to it. With the 5th pick, we've got the Nationals selecting Elijah Green, outfielder out of IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Was this sort of like a no-brainer for you here based on Jones, Johnson, Holiday, and Parada going ahead of him?
I think so. The Nationals last season went with Brady House. He kind of fell into their lap. And it's kind of a situation that is similar. I think getting a talent like Elijah Green at number 5, where we can absolutely justify him going first overall, getting that sort of a talent at number 5, where this is, if Elijah Green hits, and that's always been the question, if Elijah Green hits, the guy could win multiple MVPs. I mean, it's an unbelievable talent, and this kind of value at pick number 5, I just, I don't know if it would be easy for Mike Rizzo to walk away from that.
What other guys here, let's say they went a different route. Let's say they went the pitching route. Is there a pitcher that you think might be a good fit? We haven't seen one yet, right? We've talked about Jones, outfielder, Johnson, infielder, Holiday, infielder, Parada, catcher. We don't have a pitcher yet. Is there a scenario where you think the Nationals could go pitching here? And if they did, who was that first pitcher, I guess, off the board here?
I mean, the Nationals before last year were very into college pitchers. They did it several years in a row. I could certainly see them doing it again. I want to see what Blade Tidwell does the rest of the way. He's working his way back. He is, he's the Tuesday guy right now for Tennessee. If suddenly we get to Omaha and he's pitching 5 innings and, he's pumping 97, 98 with a 90-mile-an-hour slider and a flashing a 90-mile-an-hour changeup, I think Blade Tidwell makes a ton of sense, and it would definitely be the Mike Rizzo way. And that's the sort of draft pick that you can couple with Cade Cavalli, and then all of a sudden you go, the Nationals might not be an NL title contender right now, but it's hard to, argue against Juan Soto and Brady House and Cade Cavalli and Jackson Rutledge and Blade Tidwell not making a push for this thing in 2025.
Yeah, and they could end up spending money. I mean, once some of those guys
they probably will. They probably will. they'll supplement.
Yeah.
Mike Rizzo's done a good job over, his tenure with the Nationals, and whoever they take with this pick, I'm sure is going to be a solid one.
All right. So the top 5 here, we've got Drew Jones going 1 to the Orioles, Tamar Johnson going 2 to the Arizona Diamondbacks, Jackson Holiday going 3 to the Texas Rangers, Kevin Parada going 4 to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Elijah Green going 5th to the Washington Nationals. Let's get into the 6 through 10 range real quick, and let's just kind of run a little quicker through some of these guys. We've got the Miami Marlins taking Chase Young, third baseman out of Texas Tech, with the 6th pick here.
Yeah, I think this is more of a fit thing. I think Jace Young or Brooks Lee make a lot of sense. I don't necessarily see a third baseman of the future for the Marlins. I think Jace Young ultimately has more upside as a bat. I think there's a chance that he's a plus hit, plus power. I don't see that with Brooks Lee. While Brooks Lee might be a 70 hit, I think he's ultimately just going to be an average power bat. And seeing what Miami has done in recent drafts, going for tools, I kind of think Jace Young and his offensive upside is what they would prefer. But I mean, even if they were to go with a Gavin Cross or a Brooks Lee, I think there's a number of college hitters that make sense here.
So I think the Cubs, who are picking at number 7, would be thrilled to find out that this guy was still on the board, because at number 7 we've got the Chicago Cubs taking Brooks Lee, shortstop out of Cal Poly. We've talked on this show about the possibility of him going in that range where we were talking about Elijah Green and Drew Jones in that top 3 range, certainly in that top 5 range. So to have him fall here to the Cubs at 7, what do you say about Brooks Lee?
I mean, hard not to be excited as a Cubs fan if Brooks Lee lands in your lap. You're talking about the best college hitter in the class. And generally, as you look back at the last 25 years of drafts, the best quote unquote college hitter generally has a very fruitful major league career. It's just a very translatable skill. Again, personally, I don't think Brooks Lee is going to be a guy that runs into 25 or more homers, but I think he's a guy that could hit 300 a number of times and run into 18 to 24 homers quite a few times as well. I think you stick him at shortstop, you leave him at shortstop until he proves otherwise, or a guy moves him out of it, and you got a really good player who probably, if there's any hitter that's going to move quickly in this class, I would say Brooks Lee probably has the best chance to debut in 2023.
And then the Minnesota Twins on the board at number 8. Interesting here to see them go this route, because it seems like they have a pretty good amount of guys at the outfield position currently. But to see them go that route once again, Gavin Cross, outfielder out of Virginia Tech, goes 8th in our mock draft 2.0 to the Minnesota Twins.
I mean, this just feels like a slam dunk, and while it probably won't happen just because it's hard to get these mock drafts right, you look at their draft history, you look at Kirilloff, you look at Rooker, you look at Larnach, you look at Sabato, who isn't a corner outfielder, but he's a corner slugger type. Gavin Cross he's just cut from the cloth that Minnesota has gone for over the last 5 or 6 years. And while, I mean, when you think they're going to zig, they're probably going to zag. It's kind of hard not to just put the pieces together and connect the dots here. Gavin Cross is a hell of a slugger. He moves really, really well in right field, and he's got some of the biggest exit velocities in college baseball.
So number 9 is the Kansas City Royals. Obviously, the Royals are a team that a lot of people are excited about, talking about basically, Bobby Witt Jr. So the Royals are picking at number 9, and we've got them mocked with the first pitcher off the board. It's not from the college ranks, it's from the prep ranks, and that's Dylan Lesko, the right-hander out of Buford High School.
This was a tough one. I think seeing Dylan Lesko, a right-handed high school arm, fall to pick number 9 is an extremely good value. I mean, there are folks that believe Dylan Lesko is the best high school pitcher they've seen in a decade, since Dylan Bundy. He has developed some arm soreness this year that I think has folks a little bit shied away. Even if he has arm soreness, even if there's injury risk here, the track record and the pedigree of Dylan Lesko over the last 4 or 5 years is so loud that seeing this guy fall to number 9, I think you got to be absolutely stoked if you're the Royals and you scoop him up. No questions asked. Even if they are jumping into their competitive window right now, Dylan Lesko could be an ace for 10 years.
Yeah, and you look at the from a pitching perspective, right? Even if they are in their competitive window, they've got some guys there that they feel can help them contribute in their competitive window. When you talk about a guy like Brady Singer or a Daniel Lynch or a Jackson Cower, like those guys are there now. They're going to be there.
Yeah.
And they expect, if the Royals are going to compete within that competitive window, they're going to need those guys to step up. And so they might have the luxury of going the prep route with the pitcher here and letting them develop
Yeah.
a little bit more.
And look what's next. I mean, Ben Hernandez, Ben
Right.
Kudrna, Frank Mazzicato. They just have a stable of arms coming, and they just keep on replenishing the young pitching in that system. And I wouldn't be stunned if they did it again. Dylan Lesko, I mean, you look at the pitchers that the Royals have right now, and then you look at what their starting rotation could be in 2026, and it could be 5 totally different guys that are all on the top 30 right now. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with going pitching heavy in the draft.
All right, so we'll round out the top 10 with the Colorado Rockies on the board, and we've got them mocked with Tennessee outfielder Jordan Beck. This is a guy that has kind of shot up our ranks a bit within the last month, 4 to 6 weeks, I would say.
Yeah.
But Beck here going to the Rockies.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rockies have a type. I think Bill Schmidt, their new general manager, has a type. He was the scouting director there for a long time. I think they like power. They like guys that can impact the baseball. I just think one of Gavin Cross or Jordan Beck make a lot of sense here. And if they have the opportunity to supplement this system with a quick moving power corner bat, I think they would jump on it. It just feels like a Colorado pick.
Any names that we obviously didn't see here in the top 10 that you feel have the ability to kind of jump? And I don't want you to go chalk here and throw out the guy that we have mocked at
Number
11
11.
or
Yeah.
the guy that we have mocked at 12, but maybe just one of those guys. Maybe it's a particular team, maybe it's the Rockies, and you think that they have a tendency to do this particular thing with their draft strategy, and so maybe they draft this particular guy because of that. Give me one of those names that you think could jump in here, and what team that might be.
Yeah, I think the name that immediately comes to mind for me is Daniel Susak. And I understand that he's a guy that has been floating right around the top 10 for us all year. I think college catchers have they just have a little bit of a sheen to them. They have more value than maybe their draft ranking at most places would place them. I think there's a lot of teams that would be willing to jump on a college catcher. I think Colorado would love Daniel Susak. I think he makes a lot of sense there. I think the Royals make some sense as a landing spot for a Daniel Susak. I know they have MJ Melendez, but Salvador Perez probably only has 3, 4, 5 years left in his career until his contract ends. So that would be the guy that I circle. I will say though, in terms of just a general demographic, I think this is a better year for high school infielders than I think a lot of us are giving credit. It wouldn't surprise me if a guy like Jet Williams sneaks his way up into the top 10 just because someone really believes in him. It also wouldn't surprise me. The one guy that I keep coming back to, especially if we see a power surge from him, is Drew Gilbert out of Tennessee, the outfielder. I think he makes a lot of sense as a guy that can handle center field for a number of teams. He's sitting like 400. That's a name that I think could be a sleeper this early.
So you mentioned Jet Williams. That's a name that maybe not a lot of people know about, right? A lot of people know the Jackson Holidays. But what about Jet Williams here? We've got him mocked going 20th overall to the Atlanta Braves. Talk a little bit more about him, because again, it's a name that maybe not a lot of people know about right now.
Yeah, so I would say this. On our top 400, he's number 36. Behind the scenes, he's actually moved up to number 26. So he's moved up 10 spots of late. I've spoken with some different scouts down in his area. He's just pummeling the baseball. I mean, there are folks that are certainly a little bit pushed away by his size. He's 5'9", 170 pounds. He's kind of built of that Mookie Betts ilk, if you will. Not comping him to Mookie Betts, but he's got that frame. Jet Williams is a guy that can run, he can field, he can stick at shortstop. He's got power in the bat, but more than anything, he's a prep high schooler that can really, really hit. He's got great bat to ball skills and a short, compact swing. Um, he's a guy that has some upward helium right now, and I would be stunned. Frankly, I would be stunned if Jet Williams didn't go in the first round right now.
So the New York Yankees are mocked with an interesting selection at 25. And it's a name that a lot of people are probably curious about because at the start of the college season, we were talking about him as being one of those, I guess, towards the top end of the first round. And this is still the first round, but I think a lot of people were surprised maybe when this mock draft 2.0 came out to see Jacob Berry out of LSU being mocked to the Yankees all the way down at 25.
I got a lot of flack for this as well. And again, a little peek behind the curtain. I don't remember where Jacob Berry was in our top 25, but he's actually down to. I can tell you, Jacob Berry is at 25 right now, actually on our top 25, ironically. So he's fallen a good bit. Here's the thing: Jacob Berry, despite the home runs, he doesn't have the most insane exit velocities. And so I wouldn't say like he's this elite power hitter, which I think is thrown around a little bit with Jacob Berry too much. So if you don't have massive exit velocities, um, and more than anything, I think teams are just trying to figure out where he's going to play. Jacob Berry hasn't played virtually any third base for LSU. And when he has, it hasn't the highlight reels that have been created have not been kind to Jacob Berry. He's been okay in right field, but ultimately, I think you're talking about a first baseman. And if his ability to field ground balls doesn't really develop at the next level, I think it could be a DH profile. So when you're talking about the potential for a left-handed DH profile, while he's still one of the better pure hitters, pure college bats in this class, without positional versatility, I think that will scare some teams away. So I understand. I totally understand. Like Pipeline has him ranked very high still, but they haven't adjusted their rankings since literally before the college baseball season started. Baseball America still has him very high as well. They're going to be adjusting their rankings soon. And I think you'll just see, in general, Jacob Berry trickle down boards a little bit. But that being said, I have a hard time seeing him get by the Yankees, who could really use advanced left-handed college bats who can really take advantage of that short porch.
All right, so let's switch it up a little bit and move from the power hitting prospect to the pitching side of things. We talked about Dylan Lesko being the first pitcher selected, a prep arm in our mock draft 2.0. But let's look at the college ranks because we talk about it quite a bit over the last few weeks and who the first college arm might be. And so the first college arm off the board we have is Blake Tidwell, which you talked about quite a bit. The right-hander out of Tennessee, but then also the first left-hander off the board, we have Cooper Jerpy going 13, the left-hander out of Oregon State going to the Angels at 13, Tidwell going to the Mets at 11. Talk about those two guys a little bit.
Yeah, so again, I'm using this opportunity to give everyone a peek behind the curtain. We haven't adjusted our rankings in close to a month, and Cooper Jerpy he's been arguably the most dominant pitcher in college baseball, in my opinion. When I watch him, he's striking out 11 to 13 batters, it seems, every single night. He's not allowing base runners. But he's just, he's going to be an enigma in the draft because ultimately you're talking about a lefty that throws 90 to 93. He's got a good slider. He's got a good changeup. But I just think whatever team is bold enough to follow their model, to follow it's a low release, it's an explosive hopping fastball, it's a unicorn profile. These guys, it is essentially Josh Hader in a starting profile. Whoever is bold enough to take that and just think this stuff will play at the big league level, I think someone is going to jump on that earlier than we think. And I think the Angels are not only starved of pitching, they still need pitching. I also think that they are willing to take that sort of risk on a really unique arm.
So, Joe, we're going to get to some question and answer in a little bit here. We obviously appreciate you guys getting those questions in. Any question that you might have on the mock draft 2.0 on the top 400 prospects, on any particular guy in general, be sure to throw those questions in the comment section, and we'll get them addressed. But before we do any of that, Joe, was there a particular guy looking at this, right? Like this isn't the first 3 rounds. This is just day 1, right? The mock draft 2.0 up on the website is just day 1. Was there any particular prospect or prospects that while going through this and looking at this list, you were just shocked at where they were, whether it's a guy that you couldn't believe was being mocked that high, or maybe it's a guy that you just couldn't believe was falling that low? Is there any name that really, really stood out there?
Yeah, I mean, as you do this mock exercise and you speak with scouts and you speak with folks inside of the industry, anyone that can have an opinion on where things are going to go, I think just the guy that stands out for me is Robert Moore. Robert Moore is a guy that I think had consensus top 10 helium at the beginning of the season. I mean, there were some things that he needed to work out, but there were a lot of folks that said there's no way Robert Moore will make it by the Royals at 9. I think that helium has kind of faded a bit. Robert Moore hasn't hit like we expected him to. He's not striking out an inordinate amount of time, but he's not hitting for power. He's not hitting for average. The defense at second base has been absolutely spectacular, but Robert Moore is kind of a guy that I have circled right now as maybe he goes the Judd Fabian route. He's going to be young for this class. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up going back to Arkansas and trying to improve his draft stock a little bit, because I just didn't see a solid fit given his performance at Arkansas this year on day 1.
And right now, for those of you wondering, right now, Robert Moore is not projected to go on day 1. So just speaks a little bit more to that Judd Fabian route. Like you mentioned, went, I believe it was 40th overall.
Yeah, 40th.
Last year to the Red Sox.
Yeah, and Judd Fabian is another guy that didn't crack this mock, but I would actually, it would not surprise me whatsoever if Judd Fabian goes on day 1. He's having an exceptional year. All right, there's just a lot of talented guys. I mean, at some point you run out of picks, you run out of players.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of guys. Like, I feel like we could throw out a lot of names and not be super surprised, especially when you talk about that 15 and on range.
Oh, I mean, totally. There's
any number of guys.
I mean, Frank Mazzicato was ranked 52 on our board last year, and he went 7. This is what people need to understand. The boards don't matter. The rankings don't matter. Teams fall in love with a player, and they acquire that player. Sometimes it's a guy that is not anywhere near the bracket where you're picking.
All right, so let's get out to some of these questions in the chat. We've got Giant Jules, who's a big fan of the show. Always appreciate the support. And he asks, as far as pure stuff is concerned, does Walter Ford have an argument to be one of the top arms in this class? Well, yeah, I would say he does, because we've got him mocked on day 1 here. So, Joe, let's talk a little bit about Walter Ford.
Yeah, absolutely. Walter Ford has some of the best stuff in this class. I mean, apparently he was up to 98 this week, was generally 93 to 96 in the past, up to 97. It's an explosive fastball. It's a super, super athletic delivery. The breaking ball is inconsistent, but flashes plus. The command for his pitches is kind of what people have circled as his next frontier in terms of development. But I think when you're comparing someone like Walter Ford to, an Andrew Dukanich or a Brooks, a Dylan Lesko or a Brock Porter, while the stuff is every bit as good as those guys, it's just not as refined. It's not as polished. So you look at Walter Ford 4 years from now, and would it stun me if he ended up being the best pitcher from the prep ranks in this class? Not at all.
All right. Appreciate the question, Giant Jules. Let's go to Bunker 707. What's a riskier demographic, high school pitching or a pitcher coming off an injury? Joe, I guess I'll start with this one.
That's a fascinating question.
I feel like this is an obvious answer, the riskier demographic is a pitcher coming off of an injury. We're talking about high school pitching prospects being the cream of the crop in this draft class when it comes to overall pitching prospects. So I don't think teams are going to shy away from high school pitching prospects. And certainly we've seen teams fall in love with high school pitching prospects. So for me, the riskier, I mean, you asked the question, what's a riskier demographic? I mean, there's always risk when you're talking about a pitcher coming off of an injury.
So I'm gonna tweak it just a little bit. I'm gonna tweak it to a high school pitching or a college pitcher coming off an injury.
Sure.
And in that regard, I actually think high school pitching is more risky than taking a proven college pitcher with a track record that has been, that undergoes Tommy John surgery. I think at the end of the day, you don't know how an 18-year-old is going to handle being away from home, or how they're going to handle advanced competition, or how they're going to handle adversity. Because when was the last time you saw a high school pitcher taken in the first or second round that has ever dealt with struggle? I mean, they just mow through their league. It happens every time. I mean, last year, this kid at Arkansas, Hagen Smith, didn't get drafted, but he had 7 no-hitters his senior year. I mean, it's like he didn't get drafted because the mechanics shied people away, but you see that guy dominated Arkansas for 3 years and then maybe ultimately undergo Tommy John or something. That's an arm that I would be excited to take. Like, I guess the question is, would you rather have a Gunnar Hoagland from last year, or would you rather have a Brock Porter from this year? It's a tough question, but who do I think is going to be a successful pro if I'm in Vegas? I'm going to take Gunnar Hoagland because I watched him chew through Ole Miss in the SEC for 2 years before he went down. So it's a good question. It's a very good question. I would just prefer a proven college pitcher, and we'll work on the durability. We'll get him back.
So let's just look at this class, right? And I guess I will take you to task on this, because you talk about the bigger risk, in your opinion, being the high school pitcher. So you're saying a guy like Brandon Barriera, a guy like Jackson Ferris, a guy like Noah Schultz, those guys are higher risk. Would you take Landon Sims ahead of them?
Well, that's a different case. And the only reason I say that is because I've never been convinced wholly that Landon Sims is a starter. So Landon Sims is he's like 40th on our board. I think a better question would be, hypothetically, let's say I'm trying to find someone that is a good example. Here, how about this? Would I rather have, here's the example that I want to use, okay? Blade Tidwell. And I know this doesn't check out, but they're in the same region, so I want to use it this way. If Blade Tidwell were to have to undergo Tommy John surgery, and he's perfectly healthy, I'm not saying that's going to happen. He's pitching right now. He's fine. But if Blade Tidwell were to have to undergo Tommy John surgery, having seen what he did in 2021, having seen what he did for the college national team, and having seen what he's done in a small sample size this season, would I rather take him or, and I hate to use this guy as an example again, Brock Porter? I'd rather take Blade Tidwell just because I've seen that stuff at a college level in the SEC. There's guys in this class like Reggie Crawford that has 16 college innings. That's not proven. Kumar Rocker, don't know if he's undergone Tommy John. We think it's a shoulder injury. So I mean, he doesn't fit the profile at all. Peyton Pallette, he had one good year and walks were an issue. So I think, when I look at this question, I like to think of Gunnar Hoagland, who went in the first round because he was very polished, or Walter Ford or Brock Porter or those guys. I would rather have Gunnar Hoagland.
I think it also comes down to the team, right? Some teams like drafting the high school pitcher because they can then let their coaches and their scouts and their development team develop them, versus the college pitcher who's probably already been a little bit developed. And now when you draft that college arm, maybe you have to try to they're not as much of a sponge necessarily, right?
Totally.
The high school kids are more of a sponge, and they come into the minor league levels young. They don't have any of that, input from the college ranks. And so they're a little bit more moldable, and a lot of teams like going that route. But
Yeah.
like,
And there's a case to be made, getting the surgery out of the way
right.
case. I mean, there's a lot of teams that believe in that. Like, get it out of the way, let him fully recover for it, and then we'll develop from there. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of proven college arms that have undergone Tommy John surgery this year. I think really Gunnar Hoagland is the one that my mind keeps going to. There's so many guys that um, that still need to prove something.
All right. National Midnight Star has a question in the chat here. I assume a St. Louis Cardinals fan.
Mm.
Joe, in your write up for the Cardinals, you wrote that they have been heavy on high school players. We have them mocked with Tucker Tillman here. Any others that they might be on if they didn't go that route?
Yeah, so the Cardinals have always had a knack of seeing what talented prep player just falls in their lap. I mean, Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker, they take the guy that tumbles for any specific reason and they scoop him up. So the Cardinals have been very present at high school pitchers games. I would be, I think high school pitching makes a lot of sense for them. I think college or high school infielders make a lot of sense for them. Basically, what I would tell you to do is go look at the top 400 or top 100 at BA or top 100 Pipeline or top 400 at Perfect Game. Get a feel for those lists. And if the Cardinals pick at, I think they pick at 20. I could be wrong on that. 22 maybe.
22, yeah.
Okay. So maybe look at 1 through 16 and imagine one of those guys slipping for any inconceivable reason. I think that guy is the type of guy that the Cardinals could target.
All right. Question here from Gamers 2.0. We'll get to a few more before we get out of here. Gamers 2.0, do you guys like that the draft was moved to the All-Star break? I'm probably speaking for both of us here, Joe. I absolutely love it. I hated the fact that the draft was during the College World Series. I thought it took away from the excitement for the players being drafted. You're talking about what is probably the most exciting moment of their athletic careers, and they don't even get to necessarily enjoy it fully because they're in the middle of competing for those of them that are lucky enough to be in Omaha. And it just took away. I never understood why they did it that way. It never made any sense. I think moving it to the All-Star break is fantastic. I think it gives the casual Major League Baseball fan reason to watch the draft a little bit more so than they might normally, because let's be honest, a lot of the casual Major League Baseball guys, they don't necessarily watch the draft. Yeah. They don't care as much about the prospect ranks. And obviously that's changed a lot in recent years. But I think, yeah, absolutely. I love that they moved the draft to the All-Star break.
Yeah, I think 90% of me loves it. I think it's a great way to grow the game. I think it's a great way to grow the draft, an event that has been a little bit stale over the last 10 years, just not getting the viewership that it could. I love that. I think cropping it into the All-Star festivities is really cool. I think my only complaint is there's so much going on now in that 2 or 3 day span that fitting it all in and covering it all as a baseball writer is tough. But for the betterment of baseball, I do think that it's a good thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
I mean, I cover the futures game, but I cover the draft big time. So fitting both of those in over the course of 24 hours is a lot.
Right. Great question, Gamers 2.0. Appreciate it as always. Let's go to Kalen Blevins. I'm not sure if we've had Kalen Blevins on the show before, but appreciate it. Appreciate you checking us out. Where could you see Jacob Melton go? Has this year helped or hurt his draft stock? I would say it certainly helped. I mean, he's gone up our draft boards and up our top 400 list. He's not going down it. Maybe not a name we're going to see in the first round here, Joe, but maybe a name that we could see in the second round.
Yeah. So Jacob Melton has without question helped his draft stock. The only thing that's going to be interesting for Melton is he's going to be 22 on draft day, so he's a little bit older, and that always comes into play. That always comes into play in terms of how a team values youth over experience. I think Melton is going to be a pretty enticing name in the third round through fifth round range. Ultimately, I think his age probably keeps him out of the second round, but he's a really good player, and I think he's done a lot for himself this year. I mean, coming into the year, we had him as like an 8th, 9th, 10th rounder, and he's cut that in half. So I like Jacob Melton a lot, and I think someone's going to be very happy with him.
All right, let's go to this one here real quick. Must be a relative. Chris Beck wants to know, do you guys think Jordan Beck will sneak into the first round? No, we don't think he will sneak into the first round. We've got him going 10th overall to the Colorado Rockies. So no, he will not sneak into the first round.
He will kick down the door of the first round, Chris. And I don't know if there's any relation, but I would be surprised if Jordan doesn't get an invite to the event itself. I think there's too many teams that view his power as premium in this class. He's a good athlete in right field. I think Jordan Beck is a pretty good bet to go in the top 20 picks.
Appreciate the question, Chris. Harris wants to know, do you see the Mets going back-to-back pitcher at 11 and 14? We talked about this last week, Joe. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a very conceivable scenario where the Mets go back-to-back here at 11 and 14.
Yeah, I think the Mets would love to see Blade Tidwell fall to number 11. I think they're definitely seeking college pitching. I do think, I think pitching is the odds-on favorite, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Cam Collier is their type of player. So we'll see what happens, but I think Cam Collier is a name to watch at pick number 14.
All right, so then let's go here then. JC Productions wants to know, are there any big JUCO bats besides Cam Collier?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let's put it this way. I would be stunned if we see another JUCO bat go in the top 150 picks. I think it's more than likely the next JUCO bat won't come off the board until the 6th, 7th, or 8th round. So I'll say no right now. Not any big JUCO bats.
I have confirmation that Chris Beck is Jordan Beck's father. So we appreciate you checking in.
Hello,
and
Dad.
Yes, we do believe that your son will do much better than just sneak into the first round.
Chris, Chris Beck, if you're still watching, we interviewed your son Jordan probably 4 months ago, had him on the show. Absolutely upstanding guy. Really excited to see where he goes in the draft. I got the Tennessee Orange behind me.
What do we got here from Adit Mahmood? Over under 3.5 Virginia Tech Hokies getting drafted in the first 4 rounds. If so, which ones? That's a loaded question, Joe.
That's tough. I will say,
off the top of your head, what do you got?
I'll say 3. I would say Gavin Cross is a shoo-in. I think Tanner Schobel is a pretty good bet to go in the first 2 or 3 rounds. And then we have Cade Hunter going in the 3rd or 4th round range. So I'll say 3 right now. I think there are – the other one is Eduardo Malinowski, and I think he's got a shot to go in the first 5 or 6 rounds, but I'll say 3 for now.
All right, and then we'll just have time for a couple more here, guys. So if you want to try to get one in, we'll try to get you in before the end of the show. Let's go to Joshua Butterbaugh, fan of the show. Great to see you again, buddy. I see the Mariners went with shortstop, but is there another position that they address with obviously Noelvi Marte on the way up? Do they go with another college arm, prep arm? What are your thoughts if they didn't go the shortstop route there?
So personally, I don't see Noelvi Marte as a shortstop. So that's kind of why I would imagine they would like to land a shortstop. I don't think they would go with a high school arm, but in the mock, I did list, Justin Campbell from Oklahoma State as a guy to keep an eye on for the Mariners at 21. I think he makes a lot of sense.
And we've got Zach Needle mocked to them. I mean, he could also probably slide over and play second base too. So,
yeah, I mean, Zach Needle makes a lot of sense for Seattle. He makes a lot of sense earlier than that too, though. So we'll see. I think that's definitely a team that might be in wait and see mode.
All right, let's see what we got. Chris Beck in again. What are your thoughts on Drew Gilbert and where he lands? We've got him mocked to the Red Sox at 24, right?
Yeah, he's got a lot of helium right now. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on day one, top 40 picks. Scouts, executives, directors, GMs, they are in love with that kid's attitude and that kid's willingness to win is his fight. So Drew Gilbert's doing very well for himself. We had him on the show too. He blew us away.
It's a great time to be a fan of the Tennessee Volunteer
I would
baseball
say
program.
so.
That's for sure. All right, last one we're going to get here for the night. We're going to go to Daniel Lee. The Pirates have gone college position player in the first round under Ben Cherington with the high school players at the top of the draft. Is there any buzz that they buck that trend this year? We have them taking another college bat in Kevin Parada. But if they didn't go that college bat route, where do you see the Pirates going if they went high school?
Man, I mean, you just circle the top 4 guys, right? You kind of see who's on the board. Drew Jones, Elijah Green, Jackson Holiday, Termarr Johnson. I think all 4 of them make a lot of sense. Knowing the Pirates, I would think that Jackson Holiday is probably the route that they would like to go because they really like guys on the dirt. And I know that they've scouted him quite a bit. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, the top 10 is the toughest to forecast ever.
If they didn't,
but it's also 3 months out. So
if you look at the Pirates and let's say they wanted to go the cost savings approach, right? And they wanted to go the under slot route. Is there a guy that you could think of that might fit the Pirates that, we would consider to be a little bit of a reach, but they're looking to go under slot? And is there a guy that might fit that mold for them?
I mean, we just brought him up. Listen, here's the thing that I want a lot of people to understand. Just because a guy is not ranked in the top 5 does not mean you can get him under slot at number 4. Just because Daniel Susac is ranked number 9 on someone's board does not mean he's going to go under slot at 4. These guys can ask for whatever they want in terms of money. If the team falls in love with them, the team falls in love with them. You want a real under slot? Give me Zach Neto at 4, or give me Blade Tidwell at 4. I think that would be an under slot.
And right now we've got Neto 21 to the Mariners, and Tidwell we talked about a little bit earlier. He's mocked at 11, so not as much of a reach, but he's mocked at 11 to go to the New York Mets. And in this mock, we had the question earlier about the Mets. We've got the Mets going pitching at 11, and then we've also got the Mets going pitching at 14. So to answer that question from earlier, could we see the Mets go pitching? Yeah, we've got them mocked right now with Dukanich at 14 and Tidwell at 11. Joe, great stuff today. As always, appreciate all the insight. Guys, appreciate all of the questions from you in the chat. If you have any other questions or comments, please get those out to us. You can find Joe and I on Twitter. If you have any questions about the draft, if you have any questions about the top 400, by all means, at Joe Doyle, MILB, or myself at KRS Dunn. And as always, at Prospects Live. Go to prospectslive.com, check out the mock draft 2.0. We will have, I believe, 3 more of those leading up to the draft. And the top 400 will be updated as we get closer to the draft as well. So again, appreciate all you guys checking us out and appreciate all the support. For my co-host, Joe Doyle, I am Kris Dunn, and we will see you next Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern time for another episode of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. Take care, everybody.